Hey everybody, today is Monday, July 10th, 2023. Coming up on the show today, from Joyride, editor Nena Erb.
I was laughing the entire way through, but then by the end of the script, I was actually sobbing. It came out of nowhere, I didn't expect it, so I was like, wow, if the script can do that to me, hopefully it can do that with a lot of the Asian community. There were a lot of notes because it was a long movie. There's never enough time, and so I would be honest and say, okay, I can get maybe up to this amount done. Like, let me know what is your, like, we gotta try these notes. What if it's just like 2 slaps? And that wasn't funny either. And then finally I was just like, why don't they just beat the crap out of each other? Let's just see what that looks like.
Yes, all that and much more on this edition of The Rough Cut. Hello and welcome, one and all. Welcome to this thing called The Rough Cut, a little podcast about great big talents in the world of post-production. And what a world to live in when you get to talk about a film like Joyride and to an editor like Nena Erb. I gotta say, I thought I knew Nena, and then I saw Joyride. Joyride is a comedy, one that begs a lot of adjectives to describe such comedy. Let's start with raunchy, and then bawdy. That's a good one. Ribald? That actually sounds a little too sophisticated for Joyride. Anyway, rather than dig out a virtual dictionary, let me just say that the film definitely leaves you, or me, with a what did I just hear and see look on your face. And maybe part of that is because this is a totally new take on how Asian American women are presented in movies. Maybe that's what Nena saw in the project. Maybe she also saw an unexpectedly emotional component to the film. Maybe we should ask her. That's why we're here, right? Well, we will do that. First, let's say a quick hello to the wonderful people who helped to sponsor The Rough Cut, Extreme Music. They are the name you need to know when it comes to production audio. What's production audio? Well, it is audio for your production, my friend. Great music that can make your next film or TV show that much greater. They have an immense catalog of tracks, all created by many of the most celebrated names in the world of music, producing, and composing. It's so easy to use. All you have to do is search on keywords like tempo, genre, lyrics, all that stuff. You could even give them a reference track so they can find you ones just like it. On top of that, you can get those tracks in different lengths. Maybe you just need 30 seconds, not 2 minutes. And you can also customize the instrumentation because maybe not everybody needs bagpipes in their road trip comedy. I can't imagine why. I'm a big fan of the bagpipes. And you will be a big fan of Extreme Music and how easy they make it to license the best production audio out there. So the next time you have a story to tell, be it a film or TV show, make sure to visit extrememusic.com. All right, this is a road trip movie we're talking about today. So we better hit the road and get things going with Joyride. Please welcome editor Nena Erb. Thank you for your perseverance. Thank you for your technical know-how.
You're very kind.
Well, let's talk about your movie. I saw the film about a week ago, and I think I just stopped blushing over the weekend. I may never look at you the same way again, Nena. I want to just jump right in and ask you about what you thought when you read the script. Was there anything about it that stood out to you as like, can I do this?
Well, initially when they reached out to me, I actually said no.
Oh.
Because I was looking for a drama. I just come off of Insecure. So I was like, all right, all this comedy, season after season, I got to do something different. So I had a conversation with my agents. They're like, hey, this film might be good for you. And I was like, no, I don't think so. I didn't know anything about it. Didn't know who wrote it. Nothing. Just said no. And then a few months went by and I've been reading a lot of different feature scripts and nothing was quite hitting, and then she's like, okay, they came back. They're like, we just read the script. Just read the script. That's all. That's all I want. Just read the script. It's like, okay, I'll read the script. Because I was reading another script from Aline Brosh McKenna, who, was a showrunner on Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. She was doing a movie. So I was reading that one anyway. So it's like, all right, I'll read both. So I read both. And after I read that one, I just remember like thinking like, oh my God, this is like really out there. I was laughing the entire way through. But then by the end of the script, I was actually sobbing. It came out of nowhere. I didn't expect it. So I was like, wow, if the script can do that to me, hopefully it can do that with a lot of the Asian community. So I was on the Sony lot at the Coffee Bean when I was reading this. And so I'm sure people walking by were like, what is wrong with her? Why is she crying? So then, of course, I ran back to my office and called my agent and was like, yeah, I have to do this. Let's see if we can get a meeting. And, of course, I always kind of like wondered, because I don't know if you know the original title. It used to be called Joy Fuck Club.
I didn't want to say that. I was
sorry.
Thanks for giving me an excuse to put the little explicit tag on the podcast, Nena. It was bound to happen with this one anyway.
Yes, this one's dirty.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the title gave me pause more than anything else because I'm like, do I want that on my resume?
How could you not?
Right? Yeah. Like people are gonna think it's a porn, it's a porn. But then the script was so good. It really was. The version that we made is a little bit different than what I read. But yeah, it was good and I enjoyed it. And I felt like this was something I had to be part of because how often do I get to see myself on the screen? I mean, not literally myself, but like someone who looks just like me on the screen. I mean, I hope I never see myself on the screen. That'd be horrifying, but like.
You might want to wait for a different movie than this one to see yourself on the screen.
Yeah, exactly.
You said you were looking for a drama, and I think ultimately you did get that because the film takes a very beautiful turn towards the end. What were you looking for? I mean, other than just a drama, like what says this is the right project for me?
I mean, it sounds really simple, but I have to like the story. It can't be like a really difficult read. And sometimes, you read the script and it's like, all right, that's a nice story, but I've seen it before, or I don't connect with the characters, or this is just not something I care to do, which you would think that I would say that about this one, but it was so, honestly, it was so out there. And I thought it was the first time I ever saw Asian women portrayed this way.
I think you're right.
Yeah, we're always like the model minority, the overachiever, or like on TV, it's like we're the dragon lady at the massage parlor, right? So I was like, okay, well, this is not any of those. This really turns what people think of Asian women on their head. And also there's a non-binary character in it. And so I was like, this is definitely different. It's really different. It's unique. And also like the characters weren't leaning on stereotypes. They had their own issues, their own personality, their likes and dislikes. And I just found them all really relatable, even though I'm nothing like any of them. Like there's these posters around town, like, which one are you? I'm like, I'm not any of those. Maybe like a little bit of the responsible one with the chaotic.
Yeah.
Like a little bit of that, but I don't know. So it was interesting. And then culturally, there are a lot of jokes that were very specific. And I found them to be very funny because, because I'm Asian and I grew up with a lot of that stuff. The scene with the grandmother at the house, I mean, that reminded me of my childhood visits to my grandmother's house with the chickens running around. Yeah, it just reminded me so much of my upbringing. And I had to do it.
I can see that. Have you ever worked with, or did you have a relationship previous to this with the director Adele Lim?
No, I hadn't. I had read about her whole Crazy Rich Asians payroll parody thing. And I thought she was like kind of a badass, right, for standing up for herself. And I was like, all right, you go. And then once I realized, oh, wait, she's directing this, like, and she's co-writing, I'm like, oh, well, that just makes it that much better. Because I've always wanted to work with someone who was such a strong presence, who took care of their own career and stood up for themselves that way. So that was really exciting for me. Never met her, never worked with her, and somehow managed to talk her into hiring me.
Well, it sounds like you didn't have to do much convincing. It sounds like they were pretty interested in you from the get-go. Did you get a sense of what it was from your background? I mean, a show like Insecure, I can certainly see playing a part in this, but were there specific things about your previous work that they said, well, this, Nena's got to be the one for this?
I'm not sure. I should ask them that.
Well, it doesn't matter now, I guess.
Yeah, I think all, Teresa Xiao and Cherry Shiva Prawat Damrong and Adele Lim, they were all fans of Insecure. So I think that, like you said, that definitely has something to do with it. And honestly, like, I think Adele was really trying hard to look for Asian heads of departments. And so there's not a lot of Asian editors and who do comedies. And so that might be why they reached out the first time, just because they, how many of those are there like me out there? There's not a lot.
No, I got to be honest. You're right. I can't think in terms of comedy, nobody jumps to mind.
Right. A lot in drama.
Yeah. I mean, but later on, I'll feel terrible if I do think of a female Asian editor that does comedy. Whoever you are, forgive me for forgetting you. But let's get back to Adele a little bit. You hadn't worked with her before. What did you guys talk about when you met? And what did you say to her about the script?
We had a very frank conversation about the script, that it was hilarious and dirty, but in the best way. And, we just kind of talked about how we like to work. She had been a showrunner before, so I asked her like what her process was in editorial, and she asked me what I like. And yeah, it was just an interesting conversation. And I think I think I made the joke or something like, yeah, I was reading the script and then I cried. I was like, gotta cry over a good pussy tat, and she died laughing. So I think maybe that's what got me the job. I don't know. I always say the weirdest thing sometimes. And it's like, I don't mean to, it just comes out and then that gets me the job.
Well, I know how you feel, except for the part about getting the job. You said you talked about what her editorial process is. What was it? How did she answer that question?
She was very honest. She was humble about it. And she said, look, I haven't really done a lot of this. So she kind of let me take the lead a lot. What was great about her was like, she would say, okay, I want this, this, and this to be done, but you tell me if it's not possible. And so it was great because, it's a feature. My first cut was like 2.5 hours long and the director's cut was like 2 hours and 20 minutes long. So it didn't get that much shorter. Cause there's a lot of jokes you want to keep and things that you're like, in the beginning, you think it's all important. And it's not until you kind of chisel away at it that you really find what's really important.
Yeah.
So like through the whole process, the notes, there were a lot of notes because it was a long movie and there's never enough time. And so I would be honest and say, okay, I can get maybe up to this amount done, like, X amount of pages done. So why don't you tell me what's more important through the entire document? Like, let me know what is your, like, we got to try these notes. And these are the notes I don't really care about. So we found a really good way of like doing that. So we weren't like dead by the end of the day every single day.
Were there themes, bigger picture ideas that Adele wanted to make sure that came through in this film other than just, oh, it's a really funny movie and, oh, we're challenging certain stereotypes?
Oh, yeah. I mean, this ultimately at the heart of this, I think they all wrote it because they all wished that this was a movie that was around when they were that age. Same with me, because it talks so much about identity and self-discovery and acceptance. And it's interesting. I think this is a thing about not just Asian women, but just women in general. Like we're always being judged, right? And we're very aware that we're always being judged, good, bad, or whatever. And so I think it's really hard for a lot of women to just like be who they are, like full out, and not apologize for it. So this movie wanted to make sure that that was fully explored and how, you see Audrey's whole entire journey about like how she finally accepted who she was at the end of it. And I've never actually talked about this with them. The thing that I really liked is even though I'm not adopted, I don't have mixed parents or anything, but I think being Asian in America, whether I'm with friends or loved ones or whatever, there's always something that reminds me that, oh, right, I'm not from here. And sometimes it's racism. And most of the time it's like, oh, someone's talking about a pop culture reference from like the 50s. I don't know. My friends and I were too young to be alive in the 50s, but they're aware of it, right? Because their parents would tell them and that kind of stuff. So whereas like my parents didn't know anything about that. So, so like idioms and, those kinds of references are often what remind me like, oh, right. Like my upbringing was not from here. So it's seeing that she finally found where she belonged meant a lot to me because I often feel like I don't really belong here. But when I go back to Taiwan, I don't belong there either. So it's like I have one foot in each world. It's a weird thing. So it's like learning to be comfortable with that.
Did Adele give you references from other films like, well, this is what I'm going for here? Some that, you might not even think of in terms of just looking at it from a 30,000 foot view.
Gosh, I have to think about this one. Nothing comes to mind. I know in the interview, we talked a lot about Girls Trip, but they wanted it to go a little deeper in a different way. Yeah, I think that was really the only thing they talked about a lot. They wanted it to make sure that, we got the point across that like this group of women and a non-binary character can be just as funny as anybody else who's been the star of a studio comedy. So,
well, they were right. You talked about that discussion you had with Adele about what the editorial process would be. Again, she's a first-time director. Anything else that you might have changed in your process to help accommodate somebody that's directing a feature for the first time?
Yeah, definitely. I did a lot more editing than I normally would. When they were shooting, I wanted to make sure I was always up to camera, made sure I cut everything. And because this was a comedy with a lot of different jokes, I ended up cutting like a lot of different versions. And so, I often would work on weekends just to make sure that, okay, I tried that joke and that joke and that joke. And I would send them all to her and we would talk about it. Whereas like normally, I think I would just cut the scene as it is, send it over, get their thoughts, and then go from there. But this one, there were so many different variables. And I just knew that, like, I think she has to see it to see what hits her, what she thinks is the funniest. So I did a lot more cutting. I think for every scene, I think I must have cut like 30 minutes of content.
The film was from what I've heard, a big hit at South by Southwest this year. So you must have been done by then, I think. But regardless, what was the overall timeline that you were on the film? How long was the post process? Obviously I already know you work weekends, so good on you.
That's only because I wanted to, but that was for my own peace of mind. But yeah, we started this September of 2021. So we've been on this for a long time. There was a long hiatus after the second preview because, for reshoots, we have to make sure that all three ladies and non-binary character were available. And yeah, and that took a long time because, as you know, Stephanie Sue's star kind of like got on this meteoric rise and the same with Ashley Park. So it was harder to get them all coordinated and at the same time. So we didn't come back together. So we started September 2021. We wrapped the first time, like the first week of April 2022, and then came back around like November of 2022 and finished March 3rd of this year. Yeah.
Were you working on location up in British Columbia or were you back in LA?
I was in LA here in my room, cutting dailies until they came back to town. I mean, they were shooting up there for like, I think 7 weeks. Then we were at EPS and then moved to Piddle, the second time around. But we did go up to Vancouver for the mix. And so a lot of reviews and color.
And how did you collaborate with Adele? You kind of leave each other alone during production, or were you actually sending her stuff to make sure she knew she got what she needed and things like that?
During production, yeah, I was setting her scenes. And, I would always kind of check in, make sure she had what she needed if she had any questions. There were a lot of set references because they had to shoot inserts another time. And so we were sending that to her a lot and constantly having a conversation about like, okay, do we really need this insert? Like, is it just it'd be nice to have, or is it a must? There are a lot of those conversations. But yeah, during pre-pro, I didn't have as much time with her as I normally would with the director. I think she was just, being pulled in so many different directions that normally we would have like a tone meeting and go over every scene. But I think in this case, she just didn't have time. So she was like, here's my pitch deck, read it.
I like that approach. You have 4 performers, all very talented. You want to find that right balance, make sure that everybody's getting their time. Is that something that you had to pay attention to? And did you have a method for color coding or keeping an eye on something like that?
I don't have a method for it, but it's more like I watch the scenes a lot and I kind of ask myself like, okay, is it too heavy towards this person or that person? Am I favoring one over the other, or like all of them minus one, or, what have you? I think the thing that I was really conscious of going into it was making sure that Deadeye's character didn't come off as other. I wanted to make sure that Deadeye was likable because, we're all awkward in some way. And so it was important to me to make Deadeye like awkward, but like likable and funny, like someone, like a friend that you just kind of want to like hug and like say, everything's going to be fine. And then like, it's okay, do your thing, don't be afraid. And that's kind of how I approached that character a lot. I don't know if you've noticed in the movie, there's a couple times where everybody leaves Deadeye and Deadeye's like alone and like, where do I go? So, and then at the end of it, they're all together and no one leaves anybody.
I think you said it was a 2.5 hour assembly, and then director's cut was only just 220. So not a lot of hacking away there. The final run time is 90 minutes. I could see why you're working weekends. But where were those spots that you found that you really had to spend that time refining to get it just right?
I think it was a combination of 2 different things. The emotion was really important to get that right because we spent so much time making sure it was funny. And those are the times it's like, okay, what joke is the funniest? Like if we have this one, is these 2 other ones preceding it, is that like hat on top of a hat, I know it's a weird saying, but
I just learned that one recently myself.
Yeah. So it was a lot of that, like experimenting, like what is the funniest? And we had friends of family screenings and, like I said, the previews to make sure that people were laughing at the right time, at the right things. And that they were not laughing because they were cringing, but like laughing because it was genuinely funny. And so that was always an interesting conversation as well. But yeah, so like a lot of it was that. And once we got the funny dialed in, the emotional parts weren't as emotional. It was very interesting. So I was like, huh, okay, so let's go back and add some more like setup that would kind of like engage the viewer or the audience with the character, make them bond a little more so that you're with them and then feel for them at the end when the emotion comes through.
So are you saying that as you really sort of dialed in the comedic beats, the emotional stuff didn't pay off the same way?
It didn't for me. I want to say it didn't for Adele either, but I'm not going to speak for her. But yeah, I felt like it was, well, put it this way. When we played it, I don't think anybody really cried at the end like they were supposed to. But it was a funny movie. But then towards the end, we finally found that right balance where like you get the funny, but then you also get the heart so that you end up liking our characters and you're on this whole journey with them, which then makes the emotional, beats much more stronger. So.
Well, I'll be honest, Nena, I did cringe laugh once or twice, but I also got a little choked up at the end there. So I think you got it just right. There's so many funny scenes in the film. I don't know why my favorite is the slap fight. It probably says a lot about me, but that's okay. But I think the thing that jumps out at you, and the reason why it's in the trailer and caps off the trailer, I'll just call it the K-pop video in the airplane hangar. The film that's a lot of over the top. That's certainly visually and perhaps editorially one of the more over-the-top sections of the film. And if I had to pick a scene to break down, I think that's the one I would want to talk about. So tell me about putting together the K-pop video scene, because as I'm fond of asking editors for like things like montages, clearly what you're getting from the script is really just, it's supposed to be like this, go get it. So tell me about your approach to making that the very funny scene that it ended up being.
The K-pop video, that was a lot of fun. Adele approached this a little differently. Normally, having done a lot of musical numbers, they usually start with a full storyboard of the entire thing. This did not have that. This only had a storyboard for the surprise reveal at the end. So a lot of it was just like me looking at the takes and like making sure like I like what's happening and finding the right places to cut so that the choreography is standing out. But then also like making sure it's still funny. And so I think that didn't really come together till the very end because all of it was shot on green screen. So you have to imagine a lot of it. And a lot of the jokes were kind of put in the background later. And there were images, that would remind you of like their crazy journey, like, little basketballs or the licky cat or the Theragun in the background. So those are hopefully things that people will see and like kind of chuckle and go, oh yeah, I remember that. And also we like ended up putting these shots of Deadeye and Cat dribbling this basketball, and they were horrible at it, but it was hilarious. So we put it there. and hopefully, it's a good combination of like, I mean, the lyrics are funny and cringy and in all the best ways. And Joe, our choreographer, was amazing. And so hopefully it's a good combination of funny, good choreography and performance and all of it. I don't know if it is.
I think it is.
And all of it was supposed to be, it's so over the top. I meant to start with this, but this is Deadeye's like fever dream. Like this is, their ideal world.
K-pop is everything to Deadeye.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is why it zooms into their eye, and then you're in the whole crazy over the top world. It's exactly why it's like so crazy and like wild and out there. But I think it's interesting that you like the slapping thing, though. I
really don't want to explore why I find that so funny. I think it's funny because the main reason she's over there is to meet with this businessman to close a deal and goes to this bar. He's there and it's him that she has to get in the slap fight with. It's also Lolo and Kat. It's like, oh, we're going to have a slap fight. Well, they already hate each other. So it's like you get that payoff of like, oh, good. These two characters that are already thematically slapping at each other are now going to go at it in the bar.
Yeah.
Again, I don't want to explore why I like that so much. I guess the buildup of it. The buildup and the payoff.
Oh, interesting. That's actually, we had a lot of different versions of that scene. It was very different. How it was scripted was like, there's the two other businessmen that were showing them what the game was. And then they would very, like kind of eye each other like they're, predators, right? Lolo and Kat as they walk to their spots to get ready to beat the crap out of each other. Um, and it was very controlled, right? So the game starts like they do their numbers, right? They have to each put out a number on their hands. And I think both times they both put out like a 1. And so the guys that, Rodney Chang's character says, oh, okay, it's a tie. So you both slap. And they both would slap each other at the same time, not realizing that they were doing that. And then the same thing happens again and again. And then like the third time is when like Kat wins and she's like, all right. And so she just like smacks the crap out of Lolo. And, they improv for a long time. And at one point we had a lot of the improv in there and that didn't feel right. And then we have none of the improv and that didn't feel right. And then we're like, okay, what if it's just like 2 slaps, like 1 double. And then like the second is like Kat just, slugging it out. And that wasn't funny either. And then finally I was just like, why don't they just beat the crap out of each other? Like, let's just see what that looks like, And I was like, and of course like, you say it and you're like, oh man, how do I make that happen? Because they don't beat the crap out of each other. So it was like really finding these little pieces out of nowhere and like using like similar takes from different angles.
Well, is that the kind of thing where you would play with timing a little bit and do some speed ramps just to mess things up a little bit and make it just seem a little more aggressive?
Yeah, I did remove some frames here or there. I didn't do any speed ramps because the hits themselves were pretty fast. But like, I think if I would remove key frames here and there, it would make it seem even faster. And then so it would feel a little bit different from, even if I use the same exact take in the beginning, it would feel faster and different if I used it at the end. And, sound design is a huge help.
Of course. Some editors are like, I love to do a lot of sound design. I love to get ahead of that aspect of the edit. And others are like, no, we have a sound team for that. And I'm just going to do what I need to do to get across the point and then let them handle the rest. What's your approach?
When I present cuts, I want it to be as finished as possible. And also, I think the assistants really like sound design, or at least I had assistants that really love it and they find it creative. And so it's like, I'm like, yeah, you go for it, like you be creative and do your thing. And it's great because like they get really into it. And like this, my assistant, Tori Goodall, she had a fantastic time sound designing that scene because it wasn't just the slaps. It was like the crowd that wasn't there. She built it all up, and I had another assistant, Melissa Kahn, who did all the Mandarin heckling, that is in there. I don't know I think the Mandarin speaking crowd would probably pick up on it, but I think a lot of other people would just not. But yeah, so everybody had their own little special thing.
The improv part of it, is that something that Adele really encouraged? Was there a lot of improv throughout the film that you had to work with?
Yes, it was a ton. But, Point Grey, they're masters at shooting the stuff. So they knew exactly what they're doing. They would, they knew that like improv wouldn't really work in a wide shot. So they would save their jokes, their alts, they call them, until they got into coverage. Then it was like, okay, you say your scripted line and then you kind of hold a beat and then try this joke, try that joke. And so there was like a lot of those resets where they do different jokes. It was phenomenal because it was like all in one place. And they just had a very organized way of doing it. The only challenge for me was then to make sure that it all worked. Because sometimes, you're walking into this thing and then you have the joke, right? But then the alt joke is already delivered as they're standing. They're not walking into it and delivering it. So there was a lot of, like little tricks you do in the Avid to make sure that looks seamless.
Yeah. Well, that's what they're there for.
Yeah.
In terms of timing these jokes, some of the jokes play through subtitles. At least for me, they do, because I wouldn't understand what they were saying without those subtitles. You have the audience, people like me, having to read those subtitles. And again, for anybody listening, it's not, the whole movie's not subtitled. It's just in key scenes and at moments. And it sort of comes and goes. There isn't really I didn't detect a real rule to how and when you did it. Mm-hmm. Suffice to say, the timing of those subtitles, that's something you had to be careful of. Like, okay, I need to make sure that the viewer has time to clock this subtitle. It just doesn't seem as simple as, well, I'm cutting this to be funny. There's another layer of it that you have to be cognizant of.
Yeah, I'm glad you noticed that. We did spend a lot of time like thinking like, would this be funnier if we put it on word after another or chunk after they say it and then another chunk after the line's delivered, or if it's just like we just put it all up there. We experimented with all of it, and there's still an area where they're at on the TV set, right? And then it's Lolo and Kat going at it. There's some places that we wish we could have found the right timing for the subtitles, but I think it was just going so fast, like we just had to put it out there.
Yeah, there's definitely ones I can think of, and I can't say them out loud. So I'm just going to move on because I'm already uncomfortable talking about this movie, but in a very good way. What about something like script sync? Is that a tool that you'd be able to use in something like that, considering that there's these different languages and all these different alts and improv that you're working with?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think I could have cut this without script sync. I mean, I really don't. I love it anyways, but for this movie, and I think for any comedy, it's crucial because how else would you find all the different takes of the alt performances, right, of a certain joke? Because they're not all just individually clipped out. They're all just buried within this clip that's like 20 minutes long. So yeah, it was imperative. And for the stuff that was done in Mandarin, I speak the language, so I understood a lot of it. And so I was able to kind of like do those marks myself because Tori didn't speak Mandarin, but by the end of it, she did learn some words that she was very proud of. So if you ever meet her, you can ask her.
I'll be sure to ask her which ones.
You'll be surprised. It's not the ones you think of.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Having that familiarity, you would think that that is absolutely a positive, but is it possible that you can be over familiar and that something that makes perfect sense to you might not make sense to somebody that doesn't speak Mandarin? This is a very poorly worded question. I should have tried to say it in Mandarin. That's how bad I did a job with that.
I think I know what you're talking about. I think it's we did come across this issue, not with me, but with a translator that a lot of it I was translating myself for the subtitles, and I understood what they were trying to get at, right? As opposed to translating it literally. I understood like the gist of what they're saying and why it's funny. And so that's why I would do that translation on the subtitles. But once we ran it through someone that really, really understood the language, they try to translate some stuff literally, and it just wasn't funny at all. So I get what you're saying. Fortunately for me, my level of Mandarin like stopped at like age 8 or 9. So I didn't have, all that history to
all the nuance. Yeah,
yes.
Sure. I understand. You mentioned Tori a few times. I think when we last spoke for Insecure, you and Lanarian were on. She was your assistant and then your co-editor for the episode that you won an Emmy for.
Yes.
Congratulations if I didn't say that previously.
Thanks.
You also mentioned Tori doing sound design and really enjoying that aspect of it. What is it you look for in an assistant, and what are the kind of things you entrust to your assistant? In your case, you said sound design, but what are the things you look to Tori to help you with?
Oh, it's a lot. It's a ton. I mean, Lanarian was phenomenal, and she's cutting now, and I'm so proud of her. So it was she left some big shoes to fill. And I just look for someone who enjoys sound design because it's very time consuming and I don't want to do it. Who also wants to cut, because what's important to me is being able to show them my cut and kind of talk about it with them. And so I definitely get better feedback when the assistant wants to edit because they're looking at things similar to the way that I would look at it, just from a different point of view. And so, someone that wants to cut, someone who's good at sound design, ideally good at VFX, who we found in Melissa and Joya Caruso. Those two were incredible, like VFX geniuses. But most importantly, I need someone that has my back, someone that's going to take care of running the cutting room. So I just focus on editing, and they anticipate all the things, like all the potholes, so that they tell me not to drive through them. A good example, I mean, I'm on another project right now with Joya, who was my second on the movie. Tori's on another movie. We all had to go our own separate ways because we just couldn't get the right job that would allow all of us to work together. We had a pretty big team. So Tori's on another movie. Joya came with me to this current job, and she's amazing. We have this review room that we review all cuts in, right, with the producers and the directors. And she just knew, if we're going to go there, I need to go and test it, make sure it's all playing correctly, make sure it sounds correctly. And I have a crazy mouse, a really, really weird mouse that's vertical and it's on a wood block and all this stuff. She remembered that she has to bring that over. Whereas I don't remember I have to bring that over. I'm someone that's going to go into that room and go, oh, I don't have my mouse. Great. Okay, now I got to use this other mouse and then my arm's going to hurt later. So it's she anticipates. And she's someone that really has my back. And I think Tori's the same way, and same with Lanarian.
I want to talk a little bit more about the screenings. comedy is widely regarded as the hardest thing to work on. There's what's funny to you, and then also what's funny to you also stops being funny to you. I mean, as you're working on this film over this extended period of time, something that made you just howl with laughter a month ago, you're looking at going, this isn't funny. I just love to know what kind of feedback you got from those audience test screenings.
It was fascinating. I think, the first one was really eye-opening. We had purposely stayed away from the more palatable jokes because we wanted to really push the envelope. And I think a lot of it just didn't translate. And there are even jokes in English that just didn't land. So that was an interesting discovery. So we had to so if we want to make this seem funny without losing a lot of the authenticity, how about this one? It was a lot of taking things in and out to try. And I'm not going to say it, but.
Oh, come on, Nena. It's just us and several thousand people.
I know. No, it was just interesting to see what the audience responded to and what they didn't respond to. And we had just realized that we had to dial it back a little bit. It's not about the raunch. It was just about the complexity of the jokes.
Well, part of the complexity is timing, as we talked about with subtitles. When you're watching those screenings and something gets a big laugh, do you go back and go, okay, we need to let this breathe a little more? The audience really responded to that. I'm going to stretch this out a little bit. I don't know if you did a good enough job doing that, because like I said, when I saw the movie, they never stopped laughing. I missed maybe a third of the jokes.
That's good, because we purposely didn't want to pause for laughter, because what if it's not funny to whoever's watching it at home, right? Then it's this awkward pause. So we just wanted it to be rapid fire jokes. And, if you missed it the first time, maybe you'll go back and see it again.
Well, I was going to say, that's the upside. I need to see it again to see the 30% that I missed. I don't know if I'm ready to see it again yet. Again, I'm still coming to grips with a lot of the things I heard and saw. So have you seen this with a paying audience yet?
Well, kind of, because South by Southwest, people pay to see it.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So what was the reaction at South by Southwest?
It was shocking. We had done smaller test audiences, 200, 300, and this was 1,200. So I was okay, well, when it's this big of a group, there's going to be people that are not going to like it at all, right? And there's going to be a lot of people that don't get it. And so I was all right, whatever goes, goes. And so, I think I was telling you before we started recording that, I had the guy in the booth on my text and we were texting back and forth, because I was okay, I think we need to turn it up a little bit because they're really responding well and people aren't hearing the jokes. And it got to a point where I kept texting him. He's we can't, we're at the ceiling for this building. I can't go any higher. So I was well, okay, well, they're going to have to come back and see it again then.
Yeah.
But, we knew it was dirty, and we knew it was, pushing the envelope a little bit. And we knew that there were going to be things that people are going to wish they could unsee. But what we didn't expect was how emotional everybody was and how much it meant to certain audience members that were adopted themselves and other people who weren't adopted or anything else, but they're just, part of the Asian community that finally felt seen. And so the Q&A afterwards, it blew my mind. I mean, how emotional people got just because they finally saw themselves reflected on the big screen. So that part was shocking because I did not expect that.
Yeah. Before we wrap things up, I want to go back to some of your earlier work. We talked about Insecure a little bit. I love to ask editors who started off in unscripted how that experience helped them working in scripted television or feature films. You did reality television. Actually, you did Real Housewives, if I caught that note right. Something like that. How does that help you in working on a film like Joyride?
It helps me tremendously. A lot of reality or non-scripted is just that, non-scripted. You have to take a lot of things and, that don't quite make sense and make a story out of it. So that helps in terms of making sure the story structure still works after you cut basically an hour out of something. And also, just also learning how to deal with a ton of footage, thousands of hours of footage. I mean, we didn't have that on Joyride, but just my entire career of dealing with so much footage and knowing and having a way to wade through it quickly and being able to remember where that is or, what was funny about it and just having a whole method of making sure I can find what I thought was funny, that helped tremendously with pretty much everything that was scripted. Real Housewives specifically actually really helped me get a job with Kevin Hart, who was doing Real Husbands of Hollywood, which is not reality at all. It was fully scripted, but it was making fun of that whole franchise. So they were very excited that I worked on that.
Well, how about comparing the experience of working in television versus film? I mean, I think this is certainly your first big feature. You know, something I hear from editors in film, you have more time and more money. Television, it's like tighter budgets and you got a much tighter window to work within. What was your experience on Joyride compared to working in television?
It's definitely true what you just said about the time and budget, but I've been fortunate. Like on HBO, on Insecure, I didn't feel as rushed as, I did when it was like something like A Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, who that show had an air date. So we were always kind of, towards the end, we were up against air. You had to hustle. And sometimes they would pay you to go to the last mix. Sometimes they wouldn't. With a feature film, you definitely have a lot more time. Your director's cut is 10 weeks versus 4 days, right? So you have a lot more time for experimentation. And I like that a lot because sometimes it's like you discover things later on once you've had a little time away. And so I think in TV, you don't always get that luxury. And I think for features, Joyride really spoiled me because our composer was on pretty early. Our music editor was on pretty early. So even though I did all the music editing and everything else for my editor's cut, like once director's cut started, I was able to just focus on the editing and like whatever notes they had for music and everything else I could like push off onto them. So that was really nice. That was really, really nice.
Well, we started things off with you saying, I didn't want to do Joyride. I was looking for a drama. And then, within Joyride, you found that drama. So I guess my last question for you is, what's next? What is it you want to accomplish next in your career?
A drama. No, I would love to just keep doing unique projects, projects that resonate with me. There's a new project coming out, not coming out, but I think it's in development right now, pre-production. It's called Crying in H Mart. It's going to be it's another Asian story, but it's totally different than Joyride, like completely different. But, that story resonates with me on a whole different level too. Aside from it just being Asian, it was like, I kind of experienced the same things that the author did with losing her mother in her 20s through cancer and, and the whole bond with food and why that's important. And yeah, it's just that the book just did such an elegant job of like explaining the impact of losing your mother when you're still trying to figure out who you are, and like just the darkness of grief. But then like, it wasn't like a total downer either. Like it was definitely a hard read, but so much about the food just really kind of elevated it for me. So I didn't want to like slit my wrist or anything after I read it. Because I was like thinking, oh yeah, let's go get, sundubu or like, get some kimchi or, whatever.
On that note, I'm hungry. Once I saw this film, I think I teased you earlier that I might never look at you the same way again. And that's probably true. And that's not a bad thing because I feel like I got to know you a lot better through experiencing this film and talking to you about it. I'm still a little overwhelmed at seeing this film, but I encourage everyone to see it. I think you did a fantastic job.
Oh, thank you.
And I hope whatever it is you want to do next, you get to do, possibly with a little less simulated full frontal nudity, but
yes.
Either way, I hope you get to do it.
Yes, definitely.
No matter what Nena works on next, I will be there to check it out. And you should check out Joyride. Just maybe don't take your mother with you. Or take her, I don't know. You'll both laugh, you just might not want the other one to see you do it. A big thank you to Nena. She was wonderful as always. Something else that is always wonderful is Avid Media Composer. And it's time for you to get around to checking out the latest features and functionality. And guess what? I'm here to help you do that. There is a link in the show notes. There are a lot of things in the show notes. You do read the show notes. And if you click that link, the one that says What's New with Media Composer, it will zip you on over to the Media Composer page on avid.com. Well, that is going to do it for our show today. I hope you're enjoying the summer, or your winter for you Southern Hemisphere types, or your monsoon season if you're somewhere in between. Wherever you are, this is Matt Fury thanking you for joining me right here on The Rough Cut.